Somewhere between the ages of 2 and 6, almost every human being on Earth develops the exact same fear, and no one has to teach it to them. Not the fear of falling, which fades within months. Not the fear of loud noises, which most children outgrow entirely. This one gets worse before it gets better, peaking in the years when a child's imagination is sharpest. And then, strangely, it comes back. It returns in adulthood, in a hallway at 2 a.m., in a forest after sunset, in a house that has just lost power. You feel it as a tightening in the chest, a heightened awareness of sound, an almost involuntary urge to reach for a light switch that has nothing to do with logic. For decades, scientists treated this as little more than superstition, a leftover from bedtime stories and horror films, something a rational adult should simply grow out of. But when researchers finally studied it properly, in laboratories, in brain scans, and in the fossil record itself, they discovered something the fear had been trying to tell us all along. The dark was never imaginary. For most of human history, it was genuinely trying to kill us. Stand for a moment in true darkness, the kind found deep inside a cave, or on a moonless night far from any city glow. Give your eyes a few minutes the way people always tell you to. It won't be enough. Human vision, so precise and colorful by day, becomes almost useless once the sun disappears. We lack the reflective layer behind the retina that lets cats, deer, and countless other animals gather and reuse scarce light in darkness. Compared to almost every major predator we evolved alongside, our night vision is embarrassingly poor. And yet, for hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors slept, foraged, traveled, and were occasionally stranded in landscapes shared with animals that had solved this exact problem far better than we ever did. The investigation into why darkness terrifies us starts, oddly enough, with bones. At a South African site called Swartkrans, researchers examining early hominin remains found puncture marks that matched the canine spacing of large cats, clear evidence that leopards had dragged our ancestors into caves as prey. It is one of several such sites across Africa, suggesting early humans were at times simply food on someone else's menu. This is where fear stops being a personality quirk and starts looking like a survival tool. Evolutionary psychologist Randolph Ness has compared fear to a smoke detector. Cheap, false alarms are worth tolerating if they prevent even one missed real threat. A person who felt nothing unusual in the dark, and was wrong even once, didn't get the chance to pass that calmness down to children. The anxious ones did. Which means, in a very real sense, every person alive today is descended from someone who was afraid of the dark and survived because of it. But biology only explains half of this story. The other half is about perception itself, and it produces one of the strangest tricks the human brain plays on its owner. In darkness, your peripheral vision sharpens while your central, detail-oriented vision collapses almost entirely, and your brain, starved of information, begins filling in the blanks on its own. Researchers studying what's known as hyperactive agency detection have found that humans are wired to interpret ambiguous shapes and sounds as something alive, something with intent, rather than something neutral. Throughout most of our evolutionary history, mistaking a rock for a predator cost nothing at all. Mistaking a predator for a rock could cost everything. That rustle in the bushes was never probably nothing. It was a coin flip our ancestors could not afford to lose, and so the brain learned to always call it heads. This is where the story stops being about biology and becomes a story about behavior and about fire. Archaeological evidence for controlled fire use stretches back roughly 1 million years, and the moment early humans could hold darkness back at the edge of a camp, something in human society changed permanently. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer groups have noted that nighttime conversation around a fire looks almost nothing like daytime talk. There is less complaint, less conflict, and far more storytelling, myth-making, and social bonding. Fire didn't just keep our ancestors warm. It created the very first stage, quite literally, a circle of light with an audience sitting in the dark just beyond it. The origins of human storytelling may be inseparable from the origins of our fear of what waited outside that circle. And this is exactly where legend and evidence begin to pull apart, and where the myths deserve a second look rather than ridicule. Nearly every culture in the historical record has some mythology built around the dangers of night. Spirits, demons, creatures that wait until the fire burns low. It is tempting to file this away as primitive superstition and move on. But researchers in the cognitive science of religion argue these stories weren't irrational at all. They functioned as an early warning system, encoding a real statistical truth, that darkness genuinely correlated with danger, into narratives vivid and memorable enough that a child would absorb the lesson without ever needing to be attacked first. The myth was never the mistake. The myth was the transmission method, refined over thousands of generations because the alternative was learning the hard way. Here is the twist that most people don't see coming. Modern brain imaging shows that in low light, the amygdala, the brain's primary threat detection center, becomes measurably more active. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for rational override and calming the alarm back down, becomes comparatively less effective at doing its job. In other words, you are not imagining danger when the lights go out. The part of your brain built specifically to talk you out of fear is, quite literally, operating with less information to work with. Your fear in the dark isn't a malfunction at all. It is behaving precisely as it was built to behave, under exactly the conditions it evolved for, which reframes the entire question we started with. We tend to treat a fear of the dark as something to outgrow, a childish glitch that a mature, rational adult should have patched by now. But it may be closer to a message passed down across hundreds of thousands of nights, from ancestors who had no fire yet, no walls yet, nothing but the sound of something moving nearby and a decision to make in under a second. Every time a child hesitates before walking into an unlit room, they are not being irrational. They are running a program written and rewritten by every single ancestor who heard that same sound, made the right call, and survived long enough for it to matter. Perhaps that is the real discovery hiding inside all of this. Not that darkness itself is dangerous, but that fear is a kind of inheritance. It is one of the oldest stories the human body still tells itself, quietly, every single night, long after the world that first wrote it has changed beyond all recognition.